There are 7.7 billion people in the world. Most of them live in Asia, the world's largest continent. Following Asia, Africa takes a spot as both the second largest and the second most populated continent. And then, Europe. Europe is the second smallest continent, but the third most populous one. And not just that, Europe is the richest continent per capita and has a special role in world history. At the dawn of the 16th century, European countries began to create the world's first global empires. Europe has a size of 3.9 million square miles, or 10 million square kilometers. That's about just 6.8% of the Earth's total landmass area. That is just 1% more than the Australian continent, that is made up of one single country. And that was a European colony, by the way. That means Europe is 3 times smaller than Africa. Despite this, about 84% of the globe was at some point under European country rule. Of the world's 193 UN member states, 44 are in Europe, 137 were colonized by a European country, and 4 were partially colonized. European territorial expansion began in the year 1492 after Columbus reached the Americas. Both South and North America were completely colonized soon after. Back then, North and South America had a combined population of between 54 million and 112 million people. On the other side of the pond, Europe counted with at least 60.1 million people. Going for the higher end, that means that there were 2 Native Americans for every European. But Spain needed just 168 Spaniards to take over the Inca Empire, the largest empire in the history of the Americas with a population larger than Spain's itself, with 12 million inhabitants against the 8 million people that lived back in Spain. This was the result of European expansion. By 1600, there were just 6 million natives alive. 90% of the native population was decimated. It is estimated that the European colonization of the Americas killed 10% of the world population, mainly through the introduction of new diseases by Spanish explorers, to which natives didn't have immunity. In a similar fashion, 90% of less crowded Aboriginal Australia was decimated by new diseases brought in by British explorers. But at least 20,000 died from violence. That is 6.3% of the population. This was not an isolated event. Europeans were hostile against natives. For instance, they killed 10 million Congolese during King of Belgium Leopold II's rule in the Congo Free State. That was 4 million more people than the 6 million living in Belgium back in 1900. European colonialism reached its peak around 1920. By 1945, 1/3 of the world's population lived in colonies. That year was also the outset of the decolonization process. It took European countries 1482 years to conquer the world, from the discovery of the Americas in 1492 to the height of European colonial rule in 1920. Almost 1 century to colonize the Americas since its discovery, and just 15 years to colonize Africa since the Berlin West African Conference. However, it took 35 years to decolonize most of the world. In 1980, there were 154 UN member states, when in 1945 there were just 51 UN members, plus about 20 independent non-UN member states. On average, that means that 3 countries join the UN every year. Colonialism is not completely over. As many as 2 million people still live in colonies, now called non-self-governing territories, or NSGTs. There are 17 of these NSGTs administered by the UK, France, the United States, New Zealand, and Morocco, respectively. This might look like just a bunch of tiny islands spread all over, but together, all these colonies would make up the 73rd largest country in the world, being bigger than New Zealand and the UK. Colonialism was a huge business. Just a handful of countries in the westernmost part of Eurasia could dominate most of the world. The repercussions of colonialism can still be felt today. It is hard and at the same time completely interesting just to imagine how only 6.8% shaped the world the way it did it.